The laughter started the moment I walked through the training facility doors. I didn't need anyone to explain why. I already knew what they saw. A worn leather jacket, scuffed work boots, a duffel bag that had clearly seen better days, and a man pushing 40 with a small lunchbox covered in cartoon dinosaur stickers. One of the younger applicants nudged the enormous man standing beside him. Looks like somebody brought his kid's daycare bag. The room erupted with laughter. I smiled politely and kept walking. The lunchbox wasn't mine. It belonged to my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. She had insisted I carry it because she believed it was lucky. Inside was a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a handwritten note folded into the shape of a heart. I hadn't opened it yet. I already knew what it would say. "Good luck, Daddy. You're the strongest person in the world." Those words meant more to me than any recommendation letter ever could. My name is Daniel Cross. I was 38 years old, a widowed father, former military, former executive protection specialist, and the last thing I expected that morning was to become the joke of a room filled with men who believed muscles alone made someone a bodyguard. The Billionaire Bodyguard selection process was famous across the country. Only one position was available. The salary exceeded $450,000 a year, along with housing, medical benefits, and enough security to change my daughter's future forever. Hundreds applied. Only 20 had reached the final physical assessment. Every man in that room looked intimidating. Former professional fighters, powerlifters, private security contractors. Several proudly wore expensive tactical gear. Others carried folders full of certificates. I carried only one small backpack. An older receptionist looked up as I approached. "Name: Daniel Cross." She searched her list, then looked up again. "You actually made the final round?" I smiled. "Apparently." She handed me a visitor badge. "Training Hall B." As I walked away, I heard someone whisper, "They're letting anyone in now." I ignored it. People often underestimated quiet men. I had learned years ago that explaining yourself rarely changes anyone's opinion. Performance does. I sat alone near the back of the waiting area while the other candidates compared resumes. One proudly announced he had won 3 national jiu-jitsu tournaments. Another claimed to have protected celebrities overseas. A third spent 10 minutes describing his weightlifting records. No one asked about my experience. No one cared. That was fine with me. While they talked, I unfolded Lily's note. In bright purple crayon, she had written, "Daddy, when you get nervous, just remember I'm already proud of you." Underneath, she'd drawn a stick figure wearing what she insisted was a superhero cape. I laughed quietly. The man sitting beside me glanced over. "Your kid?" I nodded. He smiled. "Good luck." It was the first kind thing anyone had said all morning. 3 years earlier, my life had looked completely different. I worked executive protection for international business leaders. The hours were demanding. The risks were real. But I loved the responsibility. Everything changed the night my wife, Emma, was killed by a drunk driver while returning home from visiting her parents. One phone call changed everything. Overnight, I wasn't simply grieving. I was raising a 3-year-old daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home. I resigned from private security within weeks. The travel was impossible. Lily needed stability more than I needed adventure. For the next 3 years, I worked wherever I could. Warehouse shifts, delivery driving, construction, night security, anything that allowed me to pick Lily up from school every afternoon. Money became tight, very tight. The apartment roof leaked during heavy rain. Our refrigerator was older than I was. Some months I quietly skipped meals so Lily never noticed how carefully I stretched every dollar. She never complained. Not once. One evening, while coloring at the kitchen table, she asked, "Daddy, are we poor?" I smiled. "We don't have everything, but we have enough." She thought for a moment. "Then we're rich." I laughed. "Why?" "Because you always come home." Sometimes children understand wealth better than adults. 2 weeks before the tryout, I saw an advertisement. Executive protection specialist needed. High-profile billionaire seeking one personal bodyguard. The qualifications caught my attention immediately. Military experience preferred. Protective intelligence. Emergency medical training. Defensive driving. Crisis management. Everything matched my previous career. For the first time in years, I felt hope. The application process lasted nearly a month. Written exams. Background investigations. Psychological evaluations. Fitness testing. Interviews. Each round eliminated more candidates. When I received the email inviting me to the final assessment, Lily screamed louder than I did. "You did it." She ran to the refrigerator and taped the email beside one of her school drawings. "We're going to celebrate." We celebrated with frozen pizza and a movie because that was all we could afford. To Lily, it felt like a five-star restaurant. The night before the final evaluation, she quietly climbed onto the couch beside me. "Are you scared?" I looked at her honestly. "A little." She reached into her backpack and handed me the dinosaur lunchbox. "You take this. It'll protect you." I smiled. "How?" "Because it has my love inside." Children have a way of making impossible things sound perfectly logical. The following morning, I kissed her forehead before leaving for the tryout. "Whatever happens, I'll always be proud to be your dad." She hugged me tightly. "And I'll always be proud you're my hero." Now, standing inside one of the country's most exclusive executive protection facilities, surrounded by men twice my size, I remembered those words. The heavy steel doors suddenly opened. A tall instructor wearing black tactical clothing stepped into the room. His voice was calm but commanding. "Welcome. Today isn't about finding the strongest fighter. It's about finding the person capable of protecting another human being when everything goes wrong." Several candidates confidently smiled. They clearly believed the job already belonged to them. The instructor continued. "Our first assessment will be unarmed defensive capability." He looked around the room before adding one final sentence that made everyone glance toward the largest competitor in the building. "Your first opponent will be the biggest man here." Almost every candidate quietly stepped backward. Before anyone could react, the instructor looked directly at me. "Daniel Cross, you're first." The room immediately filled with laughter again as the giant man, while over 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds, slowly stepped into the center of the mat, grinning as if the match had already been decided. The laughter grew even louder as I stepped onto the training mat. Across from me stood Brock, 6 feet 7 inches tall, nearly 300 pounds. His shoulders looked wider than most doorways. He rolled his neck, cracked his knuckles, and grinned at the other applicants. "This won't take long." Several candidates laughed. One even pulled out his phone before an instructor immediately ordered him to put it away. The lead evaluator stepped between us. "There is one rule. The moment I say stop, you stop." Brock nodded confidently. I nodded once. The whistle sounded. Brock charged immediately, exactly as I expected. Big men who rely on intimidation usually believe speed isn't necessary. That confidence often becomes their weakness. He reached for my shoulders, intending to overpower me. Instead of resisting his strength, I moved. One step, half a turn. His momentum carried him past me. Before he could recover, I redirected his balance, controlled his arm, and guided him toward the mat. His enormous body slammed onto the padded floor with a thunderous impact. The room fell silent. Brock blinked in disbelief. He tried to stand. I calmly maintained control without striking him. The instructor raised his hand. "Stop." 7 seconds. The biggest man in the room had been neutralized in 7 seconds. Nobody laughed anymore. The evaluator helped Brock to his feet. Then he looked at me. "What martial art?" I answered honestly. "A combination. Military defensive tactics, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and years of practical experience." Several candidates exchanged nervous looks. The assumptions they had made 30 seconds earlier had completely disappeared. The physical assessments continued throughout the day. Obstacle courses, medical emergency simulations, protective driving exercises, threat recognition, stress interviews. Unlike many candidates, I never rushed. Executive protection isn't about looking impressive. It's about making the correct decision under pressure. Late that afternoon, the final exercise began. The instructors created a realistic security scenario, a mock charity event, dozens of role players, hidden threats, loud music, confusing instructions. Our assignment sounded simple. Protect the billionaire principal from one side of the building to the other. Most candidates immediately surrounded the principal with aggressive formations. Several constantly scanned the crowd but ignored nearby exits. Others focused entirely on potential attackers. I noticed something different. A catering cart had been moved slightly since the briefing. One emergency exit was partially blocked. A maintenance worker appeared nervous. His uniform didn't quite match the others. Tiny details. But executive protection depends on noticing tiny details. Halfway through the exercise, alarms suddenly sounded. Smoke machines activated. Actors pretending to panic began running in every direction. At the same moment, the fake maintenance worker reached inside his jacket. Several candidates instinctively ran toward him. I didn't. Instead, I immediately moved the principal behind solid cover, identified the safest evacuation route, and directed 2 nearby security members to intercept the distraction. Seconds later, another actor emerged from the opposite direction. The first threat had only been a diversion. Because I hadn't chased it, the second attacker never reached the principal. The exercise ended. The instructors remained expressionless. No applause. No comments. Only notes written quietly on clipboards. That evening, the remaining 5 finalists were invited into a private conference room. For the first time all day, I saw the billionaire herself, Victoria Sterling. She was younger than I expected. Confident. Calm. Observant. She looked at each finalist before asking a surprising question. Why do you want this job? The first candidate answered immediately. The salary. The second mentioned prestige. Another spoke about career advancement. When my turn arrived, Victoria folded her hands. And you, Mr. Cross? I took a slow breath. My daughter. She smiled slightly. Explain. My little girl lost her mother 3 years ago. I promised her she'd always have one parent she could depend on. This position would allow me to give her stability. I'm not here because I need an important title. I'm here because she deserves opportunities one can't currently provide. Victoria nodded but said nothing. The interview ended. We were told the final decision would arrive the following morning. That night, I barely slept. Not because I feared losing. Because I knew how much hope Lily had placed in this opportunity. The next morning my phone rang before sunrise. Mr. Cross. This is Victoria Sterling. I sat upright immediately. Yes. I have one question. I'm listening. If I hired you, what would be your first priority? I answered without hesitation. Keeping you alive. She laughed softly. No. Your first priority. I smiled. Calling my daughter. There was a brief silence. Then Victoria quietly said, Exactly. You start Monday. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Finally I managed. Thank you. After ending the call, I drove straight home. Lily was eating cereal when I walked through the front door. She looked up. How'd it go? Instead of answering, I handed her the official employment letter. She slowly read the first sentence. Then her eyes grew wide. You got it. I nodded. She screamed with excitement and threw her arms around my neck. I knew it. I told you my lunchbox was lucky. I laughed harder than I had in years. A week later, I reported for my first official day. Victoria welcomed me personally. Then she handed me a small framed photograph. It was a security camera image from the waiting room on the day of the tryout. It showed me quietly reading Lily's handwritten note while everyone else laughed. Confused, I looked up. Victoria smiled. That was the moment I decided to watch you carefully. I wasn't looking for the strongest fighter. I already have strong people. I was looking for someone impossible to distract with ego. She pointed toward the photograph. While everyone else focused on proving themselves, you focused on remembering why you were there. Months later, Brock joined our security team after additional training. One afternoon he walked over during lunch and smiled awkwardly. I owe you an apology. You never looked weak. I just judged the wrong things. I shook his hand. No hard feelings. Looking back, people often tell the story as if it were about the moment I dropped the biggest man in the room. They're wrong. That wasn't the most important moment. The most important moment happened much earlier. It happened when a little girl packed a dinosaur lunchbox, wrote a note in purple crayon, and reminded her father that true strength isn't measured by muscle or reputation. It's measured by the reason you refuse to quit. The biggest man fell in 7 seconds. But the quiet confidence built by years of sacrifice, discipline, and love, that took a lifetime to earn.